Today's AskReddit post. What did your partner do that made you suddenly understand they weren't right for you? Oh boy, this is gonna be a good one. Let's get started. We were walking to a restaurant and casually chatting. I offhand tried to remember what I was up to a couple of days prior. It made sense in the context of the conversation. He cut me off and said probably sleeping in and doing nothing all day. It was just a jab to be hurtful. No lead up to it at all. Not that it should matter. But I had a credit card, car, and the lease on our house all in my name. He had none of those. He worked part-time as a server, but couldn't support himself. I paid all our bills. He didn't want to be on the lease because he didn't want to feel tied down. He was deeply insecure, and I guess it just came out. He needed to knock me down a peg when he got the chance. I dumped him over dinner at the restaurant. You deserve a medal in my book. I agree. I love these take action right away stories. We were fighting all the time. I'd try to leave, and he'd love bomb me. At some point I just asked him to make some effort, to treat me with some kindness. He replied that he refused to do that, because it would be a lie. I realized that at the most basic level he just didn't like me, but thought of me as a toy he didn't want to lose. It wasn't my partner, but a friend. I was venting about my then boyfriend to a friend I didn't see too often when she stopped me and asked, do you even like him as a person? Would you be his friend if you weren't dating? We broke up shortly after. It was an eye-opening question. That's a good friend, though. That's a ducking good point. He hit me across the face. All the love disappeared then and there. I'm glad you had that reaction immediately and have gotten out. Dated a woman for a year. The day she was to start moving in with me, she told me my cat had to go. I told her that wasn't going to happen. She told me I had to choose her or the cat. I told her goodbye. Never saw her again. Bullet dodged. True story. He gleefully told me about how he screamed at some teenage cashier at a restaurant because she accidentally double charged him. He told me it felt good to yell at someone who actually deserved it. He went on about how mean he was to her, how he yelled at her. He was so happy. My jaw was on the floor. I'm the one he screamed at all the time for 5+ years, and he accidentally confessed to knowing that I didn't actually deserve it. I'm not saying that that poor kid did because ducking, yikes. Of course she didn't. That alone might have even been enough if I allowed myself to be honest with myself. But it was the magical phrase "it felt good to yell at someone who actually deserved it" that cured me. Whatever was wrong with my brain that caused me to stay in what I already knew was an abusive relationship. It immediately corrected itself, and I was done. Suddenly I got a tidal wave of Ike that was a long time building. I'm so ashamed I stayed with that man for as long as I did. I'm so glad it's over. Told me that I wasn't allowed to struggle when they were struggling because it invalidated their feelings. Nearly everyone I've ever dated. If I have stuff going on, you can't have stuff going on because it intrudes on my stuff. Spoiler, they always had stuff going on, and I always played second fiddle to them. Never equal partners. It just shows that we deserved far better than them. They wanted a therapist, not a partner. Became abusive after our son was born, especially after going through IVF with donor sperm because he was sterile. It's a kind of betrayal that I never expected, and my divorce was finalized today after being separated for a year and a half. Good riddance. Welcome to Divorcee Club. I'm sorry your ex was such a hideous open sore of a human. We meet at the bar after work. He was living with me at my parents' house when he fell on tough times. One day he was using my laptop to check emails and left for work. He didn't log out. So when I used my computer I saw he had emails from his new coworker who was a lesbian. Lol. Nothing crazy. Just flirty emails and some selfies. Still staring at his inbox. I called him to confront him about it, and as soon as I started talking about my findings I saw the emails disappearing one by one. Probably deleting them from his phone in the moment. Then, denial. 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 That was the last time that boy ever took me for a fool. Lol. I realized I was parenting him instead of being with him. I wonder a little about a friend of mine who's in a similar relationship. I'm not going to try and break them up or anything. But for me, I don't think that having to continually take care of and clean up after someone would engender the kind of feelings I'd want towards a partner. With the exception of medical problems, I'd have to agree. People want a partner, but sometimes that partner gets sick and those roles morph permanently. His mother slapped me so hard she broke my glasses. He just stood there and laughed and said I deserved it. All because I didn't load the bloody dishwasher to her standards. I sometimes wonder how people can be physically abusive. Then I hear stories like this and it clicks. These people model their behavior after their parents and close relatives, continuing the cycle of abuse. Anyway, I'm so sorry to hear that happened to you. I hope you dumped them right away. They called me a burden when I was a guest at their house. I've had that happen. My ex would ask me to come over for days at a time, then afterward I'd hear about how it disrupted his daily routine and other poop. Such a dick. I'm glad you didn't put up with that. Oh my god. I had the exact same experience and this is kind of life changing to know that other people went through this poop too. He, who at the time was homeless and jobless and living in his car with his dog, told me, who lived in a nice townhome with roommates, worked full time, and was going to school for my bachelor's, that I really needed to get my life together. He was a manipulative and gaslighting loser who didn't deserve the 6 months he got with me. Some people literally have nothing but audacity. Said he'd gut my pet cats and hang them from the ceiling if I didn't check out of the hospital right now and come home to sort his dinner. Needless to say, when he came home the next day neither me nor the cats were there, but the cops were. Good. Fuck that guy. Any threats, let alone attempts to harm an animal in any way, make my blood boil. He also once threw me out of a 3rd floor window because my change was 3 cents short after a grocery store trip. This was in high school. He was a year older than me and about to go into his senior year. I asked what he was planning to do after graduation. He told me he was going to travel with his band. I was surprised, as we'd been friends a while before dating, and I'd never heard about his band. Turns out his plan was to start one and then travel lol. I knew then we had different goals in life. Another guy was just so rude to his sweet mom. It immediately gave me the ick. She was the nicest lady, and he was such a little poop to her. We were on a road trip, me, him, and his parents, and we made a stop at a museum. He was in his PJ pants still, so she asked him very nicely to put on jeans. He flipped out. I ended up cutting him off and yelling at him to stop being so disrespectful to his mom and to put on some damn pants lol. Broke up with him when we got back. It's amazing how ducking rude some people are to their parents. Got insanely jealous of the attention and support our friends offered when I was awaiting then diagnosed with cancer. To the extent he tried to imply he was going through a similar health scare, he wasn't. The final straw was being so insistent that my chemotherapy treatment is comparable to training for a heavyweight boxing match. He hasn't ever had cancer, chemotherapy, nor ever trained for any boxing match, yet was still arrogantly and angrily insistent he knew better than I what I'm going through. When I walked outside the pub and saw her making out with a complete stranger, 4 years down the drain, but at least I dodged the bullet of marrying her. Thankfully I've met a much better woman since then. Well done bro. Totally dodged a bullet there. Even though he claimed otherwise, his encouragement was manipulation and putting me down. They gave me massive anxiety and second guess myself constantly. I ended the relationship in December and I'm working on bettering myself. First, with a new job, getting out of retail, and now I'm gonna start working at a hospital in April. Close bracket. Good for you. I hope everything works out well and you get all the time you need to heal. On a 19-hour flight booked himself up front in business class and me in the back with our 4 kids, including the baby on my lap. When I asked him to switch places with me for 2 out of those 19 hours, he told me he couldn't believe how selfish I was being. Oh hell no. Made it all about himself when I was in the mine too. They got upset with me for not going to the at time that was more convenient for him. One morning I woke up. She was sitting in our sunroom looking mad. She asked to see my phones. Said she had a dream that I cheated on her. I had nothing to hide. I gave her my phones. She found nothing and never apologized. I never cheated on her. Lol, can relate. It was okay the first time. But after the third dream, you'd think they'll learn. No, they never learn. The inability to communicate effectively during times of conflict made me realize they weren't right for me. This walking around the same house as strangers for days over petty stuff. My wife and I are dealing with this now. I love her and want her to stay, but it's getting so hard. Any ideas? I was dating someone and living in a high-rise at the time. The first time they came over they hit every button on elevator on the way up. As we got out there were only a couple elevators and it's just poopty to take time out of everyone's day making them wait for some childish poop. Fortunately, elevators are now programmed to cancel button pushes if too many are pushed at once. To counter this exact scenario, they should have a trapdoor open and you fall in a dungeon. I was violently ill, cryptosporidium, and could barely leave bed for about a week. He made dinner for himself one night and left the dishes in the sink and a mess in the kitchen. He got home from work the next evening and the first thing he says to me is, "Well, I can see you did nothing all day." I asked what he meant and said the kitchen is a mess. OMG. Along with backquote, how people treat animals and backquote, how people treat those working in a service industry. Backquote, how people treat others when they are sick is a solid representation of someone's character. I'm sorry, crypto is a bitch, and so is this asshole. Our 5-month-old son was diagnosed with cancer. After his first round of treatment, we were home and the baby was fussy and irritable, crying his lungs out. Myself and my family were all taking turns carrying him, trying to soothe him, and just trying to figure out how to calm him down. I look to see what his father is doing, and he's sitting on the couch, on his phone, laughing. I DK what it was, but at that moment something clicked in me, and I knew we were over. Haven't looked back since. I feel like maybe it was an overreaction to him trying to distress for a moment, and it being the wrong moment. But at the same time it's the exact same way I would feel if my partner was not the first in line to figure out how to help our child. That would be it for me, too. A lot my partners suddenly drop on me that they're polyamory and want to incorporate others into our relationship. I'm a monogamist. I came out of a poly marriage. I told my so upfront when we were first dating that any dreams of multiple partners are an absolute no-go for me. You couldn't pay me enough to be poly again. I just found out my brother died of a nod on a rooftop. His friend took the needle and left him there to die alone. My brother was schizophrenic and got kicked out when he stopped taking his meds due to his hallucinations. He picked up drugs on the streets. My ex told me I was selfish for grieving because he was fresh out of the hospital. My brother died alone of a nod because no one cared. That happened to my mom. The dude that was with her stuffed her in a duffel bag and ditched her in the forest. People lack basic empathy and get other people killed way too often. Got into a confrontation with a person who was using the dryer in their laundry room for longer than one cycle. He took their clothes out of the dryer and put his into it because it was not their turn and said he'd fight them if they disagreed. Total freak. Ditched him as soon as possible. Making fun of me for still crying about the passing of my dog. Diamond the dog was part of my life for 15 years. From when I was 19, 34 years old, a week after she passed away. I know you know there are better people out there, but in case, when my beloved dog passed last year, my boyfriend held me every single time I cried, and I cried a lot, and still do every so often. He's never made fun of me. He loved her too. One day he was trying the usual gaslighting. but made the mistake of saying something I could absolutely verify wasn't true, so I realized all the times I'd given them the benefit of the doubt and increasingly started to feel like I was wrong to do so. All clicked together like a Jimmy Neutron brain blast and I left. 10 years of on and off abuse finally clicked, and I asked myself, WTF am I doing? So I made a bunch of excuses for leaving and left. Took about 6 months. Now it's been 2 years, and I'm finally free of the love bombs that followed, and proud I stayed strong. Ex-husband said I should get pregnant because it would give me something to do. I was already working 2 jobs. When he drove my car to another state to F*** some girl he met on spring break and took pictures of her riding around in my car, rugged faux bro. When I developed severe PTSD after experiencing an attack at work, my ex-husband said I wish I could have a nervous breakdown and have a vacation too. And he meant it. This is horrible. I'm so sorry. When he said he didn't care about my feelings after we had an emotional discussion the day before about wanting to be better for each other and work on our relationship after going through some rough times. She's recently admitted and told me to my face she's not as interested in me as when we first met. Didn't really seem to think that throwaway comment might have bothered me. Couple that with the fact she's on Discord legitimately for all hours of the day with her mates, and I do mean all hours. I'm not getting jealous or anxious of her spending time with her mates. Of course she can lol, it's merely the fact that I, as her partner slash best friend, don't seem to get the same time and energy they do, and doesn't seem to want to spend any time with me anymore, except when we settle down into bed at the end of the day before we nod off. And it's really starting to feel as if I don't really matter to her anymore. If you'd asked a couple of years ago, I would've told you she's back, quote, the one. Now I'm not so sure. Really feels like she's over me, and it hurts like hell to write this out. I just want to matter. Ditched me to go play tennis with his roommate the day I found out my dad had cancer. He then complained because he left his jacket there and was afraid someone would steal it. Hopefully they did, lol. Chooses friends over me again and again. Never had my back. Got drunk all the time. I had the same guy. He divorced me and now is celebrating with his friends. Can't imagine another girl putting up with his crap. I had to beg him to lift his headset so I could tell him I was in the process of having a miscarriage, and he smiled and said okay, cool. Put them back on. Continued go play his game while I went back to the fetal position in the bathroom next to our 1-year's room so I could tend to the baby throughout the night. My dumb unhealed ass stayed for 3 more years too. I'm so sorry. Please be kind to yourself. You didn't do anything wrong. Sending you hugs and best wishes and hoping you are doing better these days. 4 of us were out to dinner. The waitress was by herself running around taking care of bunch of tables. I guess her coworker didn't show up for work. My GF, at the time, was being rude and giving her a hard time, even though the waitress was very sweet and apologetic for taking so long with everything. GF wanted to stiff her on the tip. I didn't want to argue and make a scene, so after we paid the bill and went outside, I ran back in pretending I left my glasses. I left her a nice tip. I dumped that girl right after this incident. Our cat climbed onto their leg while we were laying in bed, and when they moved a bit the cat instinctively extended its claws and hung on a bit to keep from falling off. Instead of just saying ouch or gently moving the cat off their leg, they picked the cat up and threw it against the wall. Is your cat okay? I hope the loser was dumped. The cat came out okay. The relationship did not. I told him I was a little depressed. He asked, is it because you haven't done anything with your life? Damn. He was just waiting to drop this on you. No reason to say that at all. My second ex-wife told everyone she had cancer, including her own kids. She didn't have cancer. Turns out I married someone who very skillfully hid the fact that they had severe, undiagnosed histrionic personality disorder. She was even able to hide this from medical professionals and psychologists, and would give them false information to get the prescription drugs she wanted. When I discovered the ruse, that was it. Immediate divorce. Scamander? Bro, you actually watched the whole video. I'd give you a high five if I was a human. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more great content. See you next time.